Ever experienced pain and suffering? Join the club. This show's for you. Well, hey there, Gracious Gang. It's Mike from thegraciousguest.org here, thegraciousguest.org, the website where you can get in touch with me directly if you want to find out what's going on in the world of Gracious Guest stuff. That's the blog, the YouTube channel, the podcast, and occasionally other ventures like presentations I could come and give if you're interested. I have different topics, and I'm adding more to that as we go. There's also a link there to my work over at homeschoolconnections.com. I've got a couple courses there that you might want to check out. They're not just for high school students, it's also for pretty much any audience who might be interested in some of those topics like death, judgment, heaven, and hell, a quick little overview of the Old Testament. I got a course I'm doing right now on Jesus himself, a Christology course that will be showing up here pretty soon. That'll be available for you to check out if you want. So before you do anything, please subscribe to this YouTube channel if you're watching the video. Like, share, whether you're watching the videos or you're listening to the podcast version of it. Any way you can get this content out there, I really appreciate it. It's content that I know connects with people. There's always something for somebody on here, something for everybody, rather, I should say. And so, again, please do all those things, those social media type things of liking, subscribing, sharing, getting this content out there. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by my friend Dalal Saied. And Dalal, we've never met in person, but we've always communicated through the phone or online through interviews and such. And Dalal's story in and of itself is just incredible. And she's originally from Iraq. I was, of course, in Iraq as a U.S. Army soldier, my deployment. Now, that was years after she had left. Her family faced tremendous persecution there when she was young, and she's still young, but when she was very young. And they had a very harrowing, basically, escape from Iraq. It's an incredible story, and they made it to Syria, where they lived for several years, and then everything got very terrible there. And so they had to leave again. They were able to flee Syria, and now they live in Southern California with relatives that had been there already. And so, as is the case for so many of our beloved brothers and sisters in highly persecuted areas throughout the world, our persecuted brothers and sisters in Christ, we pray for them with all of our hearts, and that plight is very near and dear to my own heart, for sure. So I had heard Dalal's story years ago through Catholic Answers, and then got in touch with her, interviewed her about that same story, and then we actually spoke again a little while later on issues of faith and science, faith and reason, which is very near and dear to her heart, because Dalal is, as of this recording, she is finishing her doctoral program in physical therapy. So physiology, the human body, the psychosomatic union, right, of our souls and bodies, that we are mysterious creatures who are not just souls trapped in bodies, but we are integrated creatures. And what affects our bodies affects our souls. What affects our souls, our emotions, our spirit, our mind can play out in our in our bodies as well. And so that was a subject that was very interesting. When we were talking on the phone a few weeks ago, Dalal recommended that we discuss that a little bit. We talk about pain and suffering. What is pain? What is suffering? How are they a little different? How are they similar? How do we make sense of suffering? Many viewers of this are aware that I haven't revealed it yet on the show, but my family has been going through a lot for the last few weeks as my brother Joe passed away in early September 2021. I'm recording this in October. And so we have been very much blessed by God in the wake of all of this, the love and the support people have shown. But it's an indescribable level of pain and suffering and even torment sometimes, and in the sorrow and the doubt that comes up, the questions that you tend to have in a moment like that, the dullness you can feel. Sometimes you feel pain that you wish God would take away. Sometimes you wish you could feel something at all because there's just nothing there. And so the profound nature of human suffering, of human pain, And even the worst pain and suffering I've ever experienced in my life, I know intellectually does not even, in my mind, compare to what many other people have gone through that I can't even imagine. But some people go through far less and are completely destroyed by it. Objectively speaking, far less. Some people go through, really unbelievable, unimaginable pain and suffering, but find a way through it. And maybe we can't even imagine that. So these are all some of the things that Dalal and I were able to discuss today, and I'm really excited for you to get this, to get a front row seat here to this discussion. So without further ado, let's jump right into my chat with my friend Dalal Saied about pain and suffering. Check it out. All right. Hey, Dalal Saied, thank you so much for coming on the show here today. This is exciting.
Hi, Mike. Thank you so much for having me.
And I can't believe it's been, 3 years or 2 or 3 years since we've done this more formally here. So a lot you've been experiencing quite a bit and journeying here in your program. You want to just tell us a little bit about kind of where you're at this year?
Oh yeah, it's been a wild journey going through grad school with COVID and everything is going on. I'm currently in my last year of physical therapy school. I'm getting my doctorate in physical therapy, and so it's just been a wild ride.
Yeah, I bet. Well, and when we were speaking before, and a lot of people know this if they're regulars on this program, a lot of times, I'm privileged enough to be able to meet people like you and people in this wide range of living their faith out in sort of different areas and trying to experience this relationship with God and live this out in particular ways that, a lot of times when I'll talk to somebody, I don't really have a clear-cut idea of like what we could potentially talk about. So I was not necessarily expecting, maybe I should have, this topic that you kind of suggested, and it's really an interesting opportunity to look at pain and suffering. And I wanted to jump right in, like your first bullet here that you sort of shared with me ahead of time. Maybe talk a little bit about this idea of the subjective nature of pain, because I think a lot of times we tend to think it's more objective maybe than it is. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, I mean, in my work, I get to work with a lot of people who are in a lot of pain, and it's always interesting to me to meet someone with a specific diagnosis, and I would give them a scale and be like, hey, from, between 0 to 10, 0 being like no pain at all, and 10 being the worst pain you've had in your life, where would you say your pain is right now? And they'd say, I look at a 9, and then I'd go into the different room, and someone has the same diagnosis, almost in the exact same condition, and I'd say the same thing, and they'll be like, I'm at a 4. And so it's always been interesting to me to dive a little bit more and see where is that coming from,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what was, so in your experience here with this sort of, routine, not in a bad way, but like just genuinely, like this routine experience that most of us don't have of kind of being with people in this journey and seeing that wide variety of pain when most of the time we're dealing with our own or maybe our family, that kind of thing. Are there any sort of takeaways you've noticed right up front as far as trends that you see people falling into with that journey of trying to give that pain meaning, or how much, I guess what I'm asking is, you have down here about the meaning, that we've made it mean something oftentimes. What is this, what are you really talking about here with this idea of our pain and the meaning we assign to it?
Sure. So a lot of times we are giving this idea that pain is wrong and it's bad, and it shouldn't be a part of life. But we often forget that pain is just a part of life, and that it is something that we have to go through. But it is the important part of going through that is that how we make the pain present in our life. Like what is the meaning that we give to the pain? How do we classify it in our lives? And pain is a word that I don't like to often use with patients, because it's a word that is very it's got a lot of unpacking to do. So I often use discomfort or unpleasant feeling or uncomfortable feeling. So I try to do a lot of that. And so I think it depends on the person, their background, where they come from, and kind of the experience that they went through and what they choose to put on that feeling and what they choose to label it.
It's funny because I was wondering, I didn't get to do this beforehand, but I just did a quick little etymology on it because I was curious, and I didn't realize this, but the English word pain, I guess, comes from this Latin term dealing with the idea of penalty. And that's pretty telling, because right away I could probably make sense of, like, in my own life when I'm experiencing some kind of pain, and it's, like you said, something you can easily see it as something that's unjustified, or it's not fair, and how you could potentially really maybe even blow it out of proportion. That makes a lot of sense. If I'm even using that word, here's this thing that, like, is happening to me, and I want to appeal it, or sort of like
Absolutely.
contest it, like, this is a punishment I don't deserve, rather than being able to face that it's just something that is real. It's something that is, as you have down here too. I don't want to get too far ahead, but maybe we could get into a little bit of from the physical pains standpoint. And this might seem like a lot of people think they know this already, but can you walk us through a little of what's really going on, right? Like when we're experiencing some kind of physical pain, like what is it actually?
Yeah. So physical pain is actually an indication of, like, life. So if you feel any sort of physical pain, it is simply your body trying to tell you something. Whether you have a headache, means maybe you need some water. If you have pain in your knee, means maybe you stood on it a little bit too long today. So pain is actually not a very negative thing as we perceive it a lot of times. Sometimes the big thing that we try to focus on in PT school is that pain is a protective mechanism. So your body experiences this pain just before it goes to the failure point, before an injury, before something severe. So that your body is trying to communicate with you. And when pain happens, for example, let's use, maybe like just some sort of physical pain, like a knee pain. The feeling of that pain actually triggers the brain to produce some chemicals that are responsible for the repair of whatever is there, for the inflammation, and producing all these white blood cells that are helping with healing. So without pain, there isn't really that chemical reaction that happens. So it's actually a very good thing in a lot of cases.
Well, and I'm thinking, because at the time of this recording, I'm kind of nearing the end of an actual phase of physical therapy that I've been going through that I mentioned to you on the phone a few weeks ago. It's going well. I don't have the tape and stuff on today, but I had this. Yeah, no, it's this, again, for those watching, I was just telling Dalal before we recorded, I hate when people do this on a podcast, but this is why you should subscribe to the YouTube channel. But right in this little tendon right here at the base of my wrist, just got inflamed or injured a little bit somehow. And I was just so, like, initially annoyed, of course. It's you can't immediately do certain things that you normally would do, and so you, of course, recognize that that delay or that impossibility in some cases to do certain things. And that's frustrating, of course. But it is interesting because it makes me wonder, like, how much of it is, in my own case, I'll be honest, a lot of times I probably make it worse than it is, or I'm so, like, mad about it, and then I get in this negative emotional kind of pattern where then the slightest thing will aggravate me, or it bleeds over into other areas of life, and so what do you think about that too, that's the psychological maybe aspect of this and how it's all connected? Maybe I'm just curious.
Absolutely.
How you, especially in your work, like how you see that maybe connecting, or if yeah.
So I think, like, with your example, for example, your wrist has been kind of bugging you, and it's like, well, your body's trying to stay in touch with you. So it's a lot of communication that we're missing, that we have to be really feeling that feeling. What does it feel like? What makes it better? What makes it worse? It's just really a process of getting to know your body more. So, for example, if you feel your pain at the end of the day, you're more like, okay, well, this is more like fatiguing. Maybe I am just using my wrist too much. If you feel it first in the morning, maybe it's a little bit more stiffness and I need to exercise it more. So it just depends on how we think about it and how we choose to go about it. So instead of saying, this is bugging me, this is there, it hurts, I don't like it, saying, okay, well, what time is it? Why am I feeling it right now? What did I do before? What did I do yesterday that maybe have caused me today to feel that? So it's just, instead of looking at it as something negative, maybe diving a little bit more behind the psychology and why, and to know that it's okay sometimes to be frustrated and just know that I don't feel good and I don't want to do this or that. Just listening to your body and being in tune with your body.
It's just so interesting too, because it's, there's so many connections that are coming to my mind as far as where you could go with a conversation like this, and I'm sure we'll cover quite a bit of it here, but because could we go into a little bit of the spiritual connection too and just sort of expand from there, I guess, or is there something else you wanted to get into before I do that? Because I think there's go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think they're super connected. The concept is almost the same, but we can dive into the spiritual part of it a little bit more.
Because I couldn't help it. The first thing I just thought of was just like the body of Christ image, right? That we see as Christians throughout the New Testament, especially St. Paul, that really kind of gives it a particular vocabulary that he doesn't make that idea up. It's not. I think sometimes people think that's like a nice analogy he uses, and it's not an analogy. It's literally the case that we are members of the body of Christ, and what affects one of us affects the rest of us. But I think we have this great meditation point right here, even just from our physical experience of something like this, just in the physical realm. That's when I started bringing that up. I hadn't thought of that connection, but my attitude, my behavior towards others, for example, when I'm in a negative mood, or when you have a headache, or any of those kinds of things, we don't live in a way that is really actually, I think, materialistic, where I just go about my day and I'm like, my head hurts. And that's it's an isolated thing. It's no, my headache messes me up, and I don't treat people maybe the best way, or it affects my work. It affects the whole person, and I mean, what do you think about that, just as far as again, even just in sort of your line of work, so to speak, with the toll that even a minor injury can take on someone's lifestyle or their attitude or their whole, the way they treat their family, that. What do you think about those connections?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting you bring that up, because as a human treating other humans, I think a lot of times when I'm in pain or when I'm feeling a headache or something, I think a lot about how that affects my, patients who are in return dealing with a lot of pain. And it just comes down to kind of what you were mentioning about St. Paul and how we affect each other. And the idea is to become less of ourselves and more about others. So it's an idea of I have this pain, but I really need to put it aside right now and just notice how I'm treating others during this time. And so a lot of times I get people who are not very nice to me, and I know that it's so hard to not take it personally, but a lot of times I do. And I have to just go back to the idea that these people are in a lot of pain, and a lot of times they come back and they say, you saved my life, or you changed my life, and it's well, in the time it didn't feel like that. It also takes a toll on the physical therapist in return. It's how can I be my best version right now going through that, and it always goes back to how you view it.
I've even seen that with students, in terms of, it's a different kind of pain, maybe not so much a physical pain, but a tension, an emotional pain, or just situation in their life in class where we don't click, and they have some issue with me, or I have some issue with them, or I have to help them get through a tumultuous time, or help them change some habits that are deeply affecting their performance, that kind of thing, and they hate it when it's going on or whatever. And I've several cases where a student who, quite frankly, I never expected to have come back and visit. They're one of the last people I would have expected. In my mind, it's well, they didn't seem to like me very much, and they're done. And they'll, you'll see them come back, and you do this double take. They see them in the hallway, and they come in while you're teaching class, and hey, Mr. Creevy, I'm visiting today. I'm hey. why are you here? I don't say that, but it's just like, yeah, good to see you. But it's just funny, or they'll even like reach out or send me a message or something, and just, occasionally it's a real moment for me where I feel like it was worth it. That's sort of, helping someone bear that cross a little bit, which is so difficult in the moment. But you're trying to help them not just deal with an immediate sort of painful situation of some kind, but you see the underlying issue that's there, like you were saying earlier, behavioral stuff. I don't know, not to put you on the spot, but is there a particular example that comes to mind of something where it was, someone was struggling with some kind of pain management situation where they had to, like you said, try to fight through that, find an actual narrative that worked to help them see that this is somewhere where they can grow through this experience and actually find meaning in this suffering they're in?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of a specific example, but I think as I think about it as we're talking right now, I think my mom is a great person to use in this case, even though she's not my patient. She did go through a knee replacement recently, and she just is a very spiritual person. She's very, very religious. She's always praying. She's always in tune with God and everything. And she's just always had this positive outlook on pain. And she always says, if you got it, it's just what it is. It is what it is. And she just oversimplifies everything. And it just, to me, is like,
wow.
How do you do that? And it's really, truly does go back to her faith and how strongly she's connected with God, and what type of meaning she put, and how she uses that suffering this is as my prayer today. I have to go through this because I have a body that I have to carry around, for my spirit. So, sure. And I think she connects it a lot to Jesus and dying on the cross and how he had to endure all of this pain for all of us. Like, I can endure this, this pain because he did all of that for me. So I think that's a great example to use in this case.
Well, I think, and pointing to Jesus himself, I love, he isn't the one who made this up, but I think Dr. Peter Kraft, I heard, say this years ago, and I've always loved his writings and his work, and just really elaborating on the fact that, when you look at it, Christ doesn't come really to take the suffering away, right? And how many of us, and certainly you, I know, and your story for sure, and in our own ways, in my own family, some of our suffering we've really been experiencing lately with the loss of my brother and everything, and you have these moments where you're, of course, I want you to take it away, God. I don't want to feel this. But that's not really what he does exactly. It's that he transforms the meaning of it. I mean, the total meaning of it, right? Of all of human suffering, but in our own little ways, it seems to me like this, like you're saying, it's the same kind of trajectory, that would be true even for non-Christians, for example, people who might not believe in the message of the gospel, but still there's a truth we can even see playing out, I would say, because of God, because of the way he's made it, that precisely in these physical and emotional sufferings, if we can find that meaning, if we can find a purpose or a way to sort of expand it, that it can make it more bearable. So I don't. That's just. I don't know if that makes sense. That's kind of how I'm thinking about it.
In fact, actually, a lot of people ask me the question of what would your superpower be, and a lot of times I think, well, I want my superpower to be able to take people's pains away at all times. Look at you and say, I'm going to take this pain away.
Yep.
But then I reflected upon that, and I just thought, pain makes us, the experience of pain and suffering and all of that makes us who we are, and it's very important to feel those feels so that we can make a change. And it also just kind of connects to when you're feeling a spiritual type of pain, it really just, how we said the physical pain is basically telling your body that there is pain in this area, and you need to start connecting and thinking about what makes it better or worse. It's kind of the same thing with spiritual pains or emotional pain, and we have to realize that spiritual and emotional pain manifests in physical signs and symptoms. So a lot of times when we're going through something, our bodies start to shut down, our bodies start to go in this state of, I'm not feeling well, and it's all originating in the brain. So we have to kind of, when we experience these spiritual pains, is we have to tune in and say, okay, what is my brain trying to tell me this time? What is kind of the consciousness that's trying to be happening at this time?
I'm just stunned right now because the most ridiculous connection came to mind. It's a pop culture reference I didn't expect to make. So, and it's very rare because I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I like Star Trek too, but this is a Star Trek reference. So the Trek fans out there, the Trekkies, if they're however many are watching this, might get a kick out of this. But I just thought it's actually a good connection. And I don't know if you ever saw it, but the 1980s Star Trek movies with the original cast that were then in movies decades after the show had been on in the 60s. And there's a scene in one of them where they're on this mission to this planet where some characters have come to believe that God is basically calling out to them from this planet, and they go, and then, spoiler alert, it's not God, it's some malevolent alien that's trying to get, but whatever. But this God is this supposed God is promising to take their pain away, and it's some sort of mystical power. And he goes through, and he's actually doing it. And some of them are, their pain is being taken away, and they seem to be at peace, but they're kind of almost like zombies. And they come to do it to Captain Kirk, and it's William Shatner at his best, giving this impassioned speech where he rejects it. He says, no, and this whole speech, I need my pain. My pain is part of what makes me who I am. And I was like, yeah, that's true. There is this, even in something like a movie like that, there is this sense that, it's this thing we don't want. But even, again, back to my wrist, which is not really that big of a deal, but it's made me slow down a little bit certain times. It's made me be a little more attentive. It's better to myself. Something as silly as I'm the guy who wants to carry 15 bags of groceries in from the car, not because I'm macho. I just don't. I'm lazy. I don't want to go back out. Right? Well, that's not good for your loading it on your arm and twisting. That's not supposed to do that. And that's my tendon telling me, Mike, come on, You want this to work for a few more decades, right? Don't wear it out now. There's only so much you can take. Well, and actually, let me ask you about that, because that's something I hadn't thought about. But what do you think about, in your physical therapy work, even the conversations this can maybe open up about, or meditation even for you on recognizing our limitations, and that maybe the health of that, just even something as simple as reflecting on the fact that we are finite.
Absolutely. I think that's such an important aspect to think about, because we are dynamic beings and we are changing every day. So whatever Dalal could do 2 years ago, maybe she can't do today. Carrying the groceries and all of them one trip, maybe I could do that, but maybe right now it's better to just do 2 trips because I want to preserve my body. And I think it's important to know our limits and what we can versus can't do, and just be okay with it. We change, we could probably do things that we couldn't do back then. So it's how do we think about it again? Yeah.
I think, was it Viktor Frankel or who, one of the survivors or commentators on the death camps in World War II, who had shared his experience and talked about that the people who survived, and I'm not quoting it exactly, but paraphrasing, that the people who survived, and obviously not talking about people who they were rounded up or executed and there was nothing they could have done about it, but the people who were in the camp the whole way through, who didn't get directly killed, but were just put to work all the time, that in his experience, the ones who survived were the ones who could maintain some semblance of hope, who could maintain some narrative, some sort of, again, meaning. And I mean, again, you've said this a few times, but just, as far as how you see that play out, or your own thoughts, maybe just even outside your practice, but, or actually, let me ask it this way. Here, this is putting you on the spot. What do you do now, or what do you maybe hope to do in your work moving forward, and then also just in your just life of being a Christian, to maybe help those around you kind of deal with that? I know you talked about empathy being so important, and that part of the reason we experience pain is probably so that then we have something to go off of when we recognize it in someone else. So maybe how does that play out in your own faith life and your own work as far as ministering in that sense to others?
Absolutely. I think my mentor said that to me once, and it just never left my mind. And she said, it's not how I can help people physically, it's how I can use physical therapy to bring God to people. And that really touched me deeply. And I know it sounds very, may not sound appealing to a lot of people because not everybody wants to believe in God. But I think what my mission is, I want for people to recognize good and just feel good. And so I think I want to, I have my vision for physical therapy in my world in the future is to just create this world where I show up and I'm there for my patient, and I take the extra step to understand them mentally, because I think pain is originated up here. It's how we perceive the world, how we see things, and I think I want to first reach that within every single one of my patients before I actually start treating them physically. So I think it's important to recognize that the mind is connected to the body, and I think healing starts in the mind. And it's so interesting to me that you mentioned the World War II soldiers and things, because when we think back to those days, it's like those soldiers, when they went through, the surgeries that they had to go through, they didn't really have anesthesia to help them go through the surgeries. And so they went through it, and they didn't really, they went through it and it was okay. Whereas right now, that's not really something people usually do. And it's only because of the meaning that they gave it, because it was something that they did for their country, and something that they, I'm willing to go through this because that's where it came from, and that's where I'm going with it. So it's so interesting that you mentioned that, because that just crossed my mind as I was listening to you.
And I think it's with anything, again, that narrative, that story, that being able to stay connected to some kind of common sense of compassion. I know you had down in the notes that the importance of compassion, which of course means literally to suffer together, right? To suffer with, to bear up with someone under that. And well said, by the way. That's a beautiful image that you're giving there of trying to minister to people. And I think the magic word is the fancy word, I should say, is that psychosomatic reality, right? That we're mind and body together. And as I often try to communicate to my students in a theological setting, that this is an echo of how it was always meant to be. Like, we're not just souls trapped in a body and this is just my suit, because my soul is affected by my physical pain, by my emotional pain, and so it's maybe in those moments that we don't want, again, where we really see that most clearly.
Yeah, I think it also comes back to the compassion part of it is you have to be able to be in tune with your physical, spiritual, mental pain to be able to recognize it in others. Because, for example, a lot of my fellow colleagues in PT school got into PT because they had some sort of injury, and they either went to a really good PT who inspired them, or went to a really not so great PT that they said, I want to change this.
I want to change it, yeah. I want to make it, that's a good point.
So it's such a blessing to be able to see all of my colleagues. Unlike how I got into PT, it was just so random how I got into PTs. But I think it's also so interesting to see all of my colleagues and how they approached healing and how they do it. And it's just such a blessing to be able to see that and learn from them, and kind of, because I never really had major injuries, I can't really, when I meet my patients, I can't always say I understand, because I don't. I just always
Right.
say I can't even imagine. I always tell my patients that I don't know, because I don't have that injury. So, and then sometimes it's also helpful for people to say, and we kind of talked a little bit about the resistance in the beginning and how we always tend to resist pain, but the idea is sometimes when patients come in and they're like trying to prove to you that they're in a lot of pain, and sometimes all I have to say is I can only imagine you are in a lot of pain. You just fell. I'm sure you are in a lot of pain. So not to resist that, to change their mind about what they think, but versus just trying to say yes, agreeing with them, but let me help you move on from that. So
Sure.
yeah.
And I love that line that you had there. I don't know if that was a Dalal original, but that what we resist persists.
Yeah.
Because I was like, yes, as I read that, I was like, because that's the reason I went into PT for the wrist thing, was because I wasn't going to do it. This is like the second or third time. This is probably the worst of it. And I was like, just waiting for it to take care of itself. And a coworker who does like athletic training on the side was basically like, he's like, see, you're wearing a brace right now, and that's telling me, changing, day-to-day life stuff. That means you got to go. And I was like, okay. And, what's the excuse? Oh, I'm busy. Okay. Are you too busy to try to do something to make sure that your wrist isn't wrecked for the rest of your life? Is that how busy? Yeah. It's like, but then it's like, well, maybe I'm too busy. Maybe I need to make some changes. And that's something too. Maybe in our closing minutes here, I could just, again, bring it back to more the spiritual side, or really both, but it's all one thing. But the lesson here maybe for us about how sometimes we need to sort of slow ourselves down and really pay close attention to that thing maybe I don't want to. It's my body, but also maybe in my soul, that habit, that particular way I treat my mom, that, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. When is the time that we need to kind of make that decision no one else can make for us, and go in for the therapy, so to speak? So what do you think about that from, obviously from, the professional side, but then in the realm of the spirit as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we covered quite a lot of like physical stuff, but I think when it comes to like having spiritual pain, I think it's also important to that's why I loved like silent retreats. I think they really bring me back personally to a place of what is God trying to tell me right now? Why am I feeling this certain way? And what needs to be changed? It's because we get caught up in, everyday stuff in life, and we just kind of miss that communication with God. And then so sometimes when we feel that spiritual pain, it's like, okay, well, I need to pause everything, and I need to get in touch with myself, and most importantly with God, so that we can be in the present moment and just really truthfully feel what God wants us to feel at that point. And maybe there's a great message for us to be learned and take on from there. So, you experience this sort of pain, and it's like, okay, well, why did I feel that way? Why did God allow it to happen? And then take the take-home message and maybe do something great with it. So there's always a place for a change.
Oh, well said. And I love that, that point that you made too. We can kind of maybe bring it home there as far as this, pain on the physical side, and also, emotional as well with that. And then the spiritual side being this call to the present, this we're so focused on what I'm going to do this tomorrow, I'm going to do that tomorrow. And if I'm so fixated on my plans, my imagination of how things should be, then clearly anything that might disrupt that is going to be this maybe unbearable, deteriorating influence in my life, where it could be, and maybe God precisely gave it to me or is allowing me to go through it to be something that wakes me up, brings me closer to Him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
To make a change.
Yep. Well, Dalal, thank you so much for coming on today. This has been just a great chat. There's so much more that we could go into here, I'm sure, and I definitely want to have you back on. There's a number of things, as I said at the beginning, a number of things we could talk about, but thank you so much for coming on today.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, God bless. What a wonderful, wonderful conversation. Truly a blessing. I'm so blessed to know Dalal. After we were on the interview, we chatted for a little bit afterwards, and she just had some great words of encouragement and about everything my family's been going through, and just really, really wonderful, warm person. I'm so happy to sort of give you all the opportunity to sort of see her and hear her today, and kind of get to know her a little bit, and definitely keep her and her family too in your prayers for sure. So thank you all so much for tuning into the Gracious Guest Show. Remember, like, subscribe, share this far and wide, and until next time, don't forget to wonder. Take care.